Struggling to communicate with your co-parent? That's why Peaceful Co-parenting Messenger was created. It's a communication tool for all co-parents, but especially those who are in high conflict situations. I always tell co-parents who ask, sign up for Peaceful Co-parenting Messenger as early as possible in your separation and divorce process, because you never know when you're going to need a more robust communication tool that allows you to set boundaries on the communication you have with your co-parent. Are you getting messages that look like War and Peace? It's not a text message. It's the length of a novel. Set the brief chat limitation in the app and keep those messages short and to the point. It's about the kids, right? Keep the focus there. You can also limit the number of messages you receive in a day and other nice a la carte features meant to bring sanity to your life. You deserve that, and your kids do too. Peaceful Co-parenting Messenger in the Apple App Store and soon in the Google Play Store. Go to peacefulparentapp.com for more information.
This week on Peaceful Co-parenting Podcast.
What I discovered pretty quickly was that in family court, when there are children involved, gray rock is not ideal, actually. It's great from a therapeutic standpoint, but not so much when you are under the microscope of family court. People, when they were attempting to gray rock and disengage, it actually made them look very cold and bitter. I am, big on communication. I dislike conflict. I'm a great mom. When I am gray rocking, none of that comes through.
Welcome to Peaceful Co-parenting Podcast, where we discuss strategies and tips to improve your co-parenting situation, especially if it's high conflict. I'm Bianca Balogh, co-parent, mother, and entrepreneur, creator of Peaceful Co-parenting Messenger app, and believer in turning challenging situations into something positive.
This week, we're talking about types of communication styles you can use when dealing with difficult people, especially narcissists. Have you ever heard of gray rock communication? How about yellow rock? We're breaking it down for you today, and there's no better person than Tiny Swithin, the founder of One Mom's Battle, to tell us all about it. She's the person who coined the term yellow rock communication. Let me introduce Tina. She's a mother and the survivor of a mentally and psychologically abusive marriage. She worked hard over 10 years to terminate her ex-husband's parenting rights. Now, she's devoted to bringing awareness to what she calls the broken family court system and to educating court professionals about personality disorders in relation to divorce proceedings. Tina, it's an honor to have you back. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Happy New Year. I'm happy to be here. It's an important topic.
Thanks. Is there anything else you'd like to add about you?
Gosh, I 2 years ago created something called Family Court Awareness Month, which is every November. And it's a big topic because the reality is most people in the community anywhere don't know that we have a problem in the family court system. So it's a way to for me to put this on the radar at a community level, because this type of divorce and the issues that we're seeing in the family court system, people feel so isolated and alone, and they have a difficult time explaining to people what's happening. So we're starting the communication and opening the topic for conversation at a community level with mayors, with city council. And so that's been a big part of my work lately and over the past 2 years. So that's exciting. That's my plug for Family Court Awareness Month.
How have you seen it evolve over 2 years?
Our first year, we did a cross-country tour, and we had media events and formed relationships and connections with a lot of domestic violence agencies, because what I see is that there's a disconnect between the DV agencies and what we're telling survivors, get out, be brave, everything's going to be better now. And then the reality of what they walk into in family court. We also coined post-separation abuse. it's a topic that survivors are either, if they're aware of what's happening in family court, they're afraid to leave the abusive situation. And if they do make the decision to leave, they are finding out that the abuse post-separation can actually be more painful than what they experienced during the relationship, because now they don't have the ability to protect their kids. So the first year, our efforts were really in making connections with DV agencies and other professionals in the system. And this past year, it's been community level, just putting it on the map that, hey, we have a problem. It's a crisis.
So has COVID really affected your ability to get out there and bring awareness to it, or has it been okay?
I think for me personally, it's actually opened more doors because it's forced everybody to move online.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's easier to reach people than trying to set up media stops in Albuquerque, New Mexico, or wherever.
Yeah, I could see that happening. Well, good. Thanks for adding that. And also just jumping into today's topic, I'm really excited to talk about it. Communicating with your co-parent can be difficult under the best circumstances, but when you have to work with someone who's a difficult person, it can be even more challenging. So can you describe how you first communicated with your ex-husband when you first separated?
My therapist, who is a wonderful human, taught me all about gray rock communication, which is, the ability to have boundaries, the ability to put up that wall and say, no, I'm not going to be your feed source anymore. And it's very non-emotional communication. The whole basis is being as boring as a gray rock. So you're just unassuming, there's nothing they can derive from you to keep that toxic feed cycle going. And when there's no children involved, it's a wonderful thing. But also for survivors, when they first read about gray rock and how to disengage from this toxic person, and you're feeling educated and empowered, I walked down that path. So I very much understand how that feels when you're having these light bulb moments and then realizing, okay, this is how I'm allowed to disengage, put up boundaries, keep myself in a healthier mindset. But what I discovered pretty quickly was that in family court, when there are children involved, gray rock is not ideal, actually. It's great from a therapeutic standpoint, but not so much when you are under the microscope of family court.
Okay, so backing up, you had mentioned a feed source. So can you explain that a little bit more about why the explaining and the apologizing and the defending can backfire and kind of just create more and more toxicity?
A narcissist or a toxic, unhealthy individual, they are driven by engagement of any type, whether it's good, it's, that's where we see the love bombing in the beginning from a toxic person. That's where their feed supply is coming from. But when the relationship ends, or when you're caught up in that cycle of going back and forth and, the relationship coming to a close, their feed source, that communication, no matter if it's positive or negative, just them knowing that they have you engaged is like a drug to them. It's like fuel. But for those of us who don't operate in that unhealthy place, I remember getting the emails, the attacks in the beginning, and spending hours defending myself and drafting this email about how I'm not a neglectful parent just because my 2-year-old had mismatched socks, and that I do read to my daughters every night, and that I'm not neglecting them. And for me personally, when you are someone who's honest and a good person and you pride yourself on your parenting, when you're under attack, you feel this need to defend yourself. And I remember reading the emails from my ex-husband and thinking, how does he not know me? Where is this coming from? He knows who I am. And so it's so confusing. And that's their goal, is to hook you in. And it's exhausting.
Yeah, hook you. I like that because I felt the same way. If I engaged on any level, I would just get more of the same. And so that's where these communication strategies, right, can be helpful. Like Gray Rock can shut that down because that like shuts off the feed source, as you said. So you were utilizing Gray Rock and found that it wasn't helpful to you in the family court system. What are the pros of using Gray Rock? And then we can talk about maybe some of the risks of using that communication style.
Sure. So for me, it was about year 2 in my child custody battle when I started positioning myself in the courtroom to watch other proceedings and to really learn my local court system, because you're operating in this world that feels like the twilight zone, and you're questioning, am I the unstable person, because nothing seems to make sense. I started looking at things through a different lens. When I was watching other family court cases and proceedings, I started having a little bit more compassion for the judges, because you're watching two people ping pong back and forth. And I would watch these cases and think, gosh, I have a hard time determining who the unhealthy parent is. They both seem so believable. But then when you would see their communication blasted up on the big screen of the courtroom, I started to pick up on in unhealthy dynamics, high conflict custody cases, people, when they were attempting to gray rock and disengage, it actually made them look very cold and bitter, and in my opinion, presented them in a bad light. And so it was looking at it through the lens of the judge, where they don't know either party. You could write 100 different emails, and the one email you write that puts you in a bad light is going to be the one that opposing counsel puts up on the big screen in court. And the judge, through that limited view, is making a decision about who I am or who you are based on what's in front of them, which is a very small glimpse. And so I started realizing the importance of communication, that the judge doesn't know who I am. And while I know I'm the healthier of the two parents, my gray rock communication, which helped, I give a lot of credit to Gray Rock. It helped me to regain my sanity and not engaging in these emails. And so I understood how important it was, but I also had concerns of how I was coming across to the court. I always say, if I can read email communication between two people and walk away thinking one person doesn't like the other, you have to go back to the drawing board, because a neutral third party reading your communication should not be able to form that opinion. In my gray rock communication to my ex-husband, it could have been perceived as I didn't like him, or I was bitter, or, and he was a master of painting these super flowery, the girls ate crispy toasted bacon and we watched bunny rabbits hop around the backyard, so he was sending me these flowery, bizarre emails. And then I would write back noted or, something like that along the gray rock. And I just looked cold. And so that was kind of my awakening, was watching his emails work. The flowery, fuzzy bunnies running around the yard paints a picture. And if the court doesn't know who he is and how dangerous he is, that does work sometimes. And so I started realizing my responses and my communication are of the utmost importance, and I'm blowing it by using this style.
So difficult people and say narcissists, they can be very charming, very convincing, dramatic, right? And that gets a lot of attention in the courtroom. And then the flip side is the gray rock can paint this picture of a cold, disengaged other individual. So that's a good example that you provided, which was noted. So that's an example of a gray rock response, one word, noted or received or something like that. Any other examples to kind of help listeners understand what that communication style looks like?
It's cold, it's unassuming, it's just very brief with zero emotion. I disagree. That would just be a gray rock response, just short to the point, but zero emotion, and so what the problem with it is that it doesn't allow who I am, my authentic truth.
Mm-hmm.
I am a kind person. I am, big on communication. I dislike conflict. I'm a great mom. When I am gray rocking, none of that comes through. It's actually not me. It's not authentic to who I am.
Mm-hmm. You also said that it helped to kind of regain your sanity because you weren't engaging in the defending and the apologizing and that kind of thing.
Right.
But I would also say, having practiced gray rock as well, it was really hard. Have those attacks be like water off a duck's back and not engage. I found it very difficult to use that style as well.
And you can respond. I know for me, there was some healing in even mentally responding to those crazy attacks or writing. I remember I would take one of his attacks and forward it to my aunt and then kind of decode and kind of poke fun at just the craziness behind it and how out of touch with reality it was. And so there was therapy in that, kind of, or saying what I want to say to him, but not really sending it. So mentally, you can still do that, to some degree, but just don't press send.
Yes, I totally did that too. And that was helpful for me as well, where you write the response immediately because you have that initial reaction to reply right away.
Right.
You're mad, you want to defend. And so I would write this like long defensive, emotional message back. And then I'd be like, okay, breathe, just either delete right away so it doesn't get sent accidentally, or just like come back to it after 24 hours or even just a couple hours and try again, right?
Yeah. No, and there's an example I have shared. And, so let's say my ex-husband sends me an email that says, hi, Tina, I'm hoping to attend Piper's gymnastics class on Tuesday. What time is it? A gray rock communication would be, denying that and just saying, you do it on your own parenting time or whatever, but shutting down his request. And a yellow rock, you can still shut down his request, but you're doing it in a way that allows you to present in a better light, to stand in your authentic truth. And so my yellow rock response to that would be, I look forward to getting to the point in our co-parenting relationship where we can come together for gymnastics and other activities. But with the current level of conflict, I don't believe it's healthy for the children. And then you could even say, there's an end of the year gymnastics event. I'll be sure to send that over when I have it, because then it shows that big events, recitals, performances, you're willing to come together for the kids. But a weekly gymnastics class for a 4-year-old, it's truly not in the child's best interest with that level of conflict. So it allows you to shut it down. I don't look bad. I look like I am putting the kids first and that I'm still, singing Kumbaya as a co-parent, because the difficult part of these cases is in therapy, we learn that parallel parenting, where you're both in your own lane, not worrying about what's going on at the other person's house, is the way to go. But the court expects us to co-parent. And until the court determines that the other party is only capable of parallel parenting, we have to show up and show that we are the healthier of the two. And so it's both, gray rock, yellow rock in our actions and in our communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. So that was a good transition to yellow rock. Would you say anything more to describe the communication style to listeners? I feel like you described it really well, but anything more you'd like to say?
Yeah, at its base, it is still a gray rock. I actually have a couple of rocks laying around that just have a little touch of yellow, a yellow heart on them, but they're still gray rocks. It's the same concept, but if you are reading or watching yellow rock communication or actions, they're smooth, they're calm, they're collected, just like a gray rock, but it has an air of friendliness or happiness or optimism or, intellect, behind it. And so it allows us to showcase, who I am as a person, who I am as a parent, so that when I'm under the microscope, the court gets an idea of who I am.
Yeah, I really like that. I would go further and kind of say, for my own, and I don't even know if I am actually doing yellow rock or not, but I would say with my own communication, I kind of go back to the original question of whatever message I received from my ex-husband. And then I'm like, well, what's my answer? Yes, no, maybe, whatever. And I just don't address any of the attacks that were in the message. They're not addressed at all. The question is answered. And I actually pretend like he was the most pleasant a person in the whole world. I'm the best co-parent on the planet. So I kind of just pretend like that's my headspace, and then I'll respond in that light. And then I reread it a couple of times so to make sure.
Exactly. That's exactly it. It's not engaging in any of the attacks, but there are situations where I've seen and experienced where if you completely, I guess it depends on the situation and what the attack is, so there are situations where a non-response can be seen as you're guilty of that.
Sure.
It's kind of a case by case situation, but for me, it's, I will not engage in attacks that, or gosh, what is the one I used to like to use? And it was your attempt to create a false narrative for litigation purposes has been noted. And then I would answer everything else in the email in a polite fashion, that type of thing.
Yeah, so that's great. I'm really glad that you brought up the point of the non-response. That was something I wanted to ask you about, as well as the canned response, which is also something I wanted to talk to you about, because it sounds like that's one of your canned responses that you can kind of pull from.
Yes.
I totally made that mistake, and I don't even know if it was, but upon reflection of looking back, I kind of feel like the non-response hurt me. Because there were these messages I would receive. There was nothing in it that really needed to be addressed, and I just flat out didn't respond at all. And it looks like I'm not engaged at all. And so then I just didn't know how to respond, so I just wouldn't respond at all. So anyway, I think it's a good thing to consider of how to respond, and maybe doing something, saying something.
Yeah, and that's where the canned responses that we've created at One Mom's Battle, they're available on the One Mom's Battle website, onemomsbattle.com. It's a PDF, and it has 50 different canned responses that you can literally cut and paste and use when you are at a loss for how to respond or how to answer. What I will say, I wouldn't use them exactly, because you want it to be your authentic voice. You don't want it to sound like you're cutting and pasting something that you found on the internet, because then that's suspicious. And again, for me, it was really determining what my truth is. And that became my foundation. My truth is that if I were to divorce a healthy person, I would be like winning the co-parenting lotto because I dislike conflict. I'm a nice person, all of those things. And so it was getting so firm in my truth, actually visualizing me standing on a platform of my truth, so that any of those attacks that came through, it does become like water on a duck's back. You are able to kind of go, no, I know my truth. That is not who I am. And then you're responding from that place, which is more centered and healthier.
I think it probably takes everybody a different amount of time to kind of get to that point where you can be centered and not so triggered. Because I think initially when you first end a relationship, it can be extremely difficult. Sometimes it can take years to get to that point where you're able to be in your truth and centered. Why is it important to have a thoughtful communication strategy when dealing with a difficult co-parent?
Especially for those where child custody is a situation or an issue. If you are under a microscope of a judge, a custody evaluator, even sometimes your own attorneys, you want to show who you are, that you are the healthier of the two parents. During litigation purposes or times, especially, keeping in mind they don't know either party.
When you have something in mind of a strategy, then maybe you're not as triggered so quickly because you can remind yourself of what is it that I'm trying to accomplish here? What have I decided to do? And then you can go from there.
Right. And choosing your battles wisely. I mean, that's been something that I've recognized from pretty early on in my custody case, because I remember the first time I was in court and the judge looked at both of us, and here I'm literally doing my court paperwork from the women's shelter that morning. And I thought that would automatically paint a picture for the court that I'm in fear for my life. I am afraid of this person. But I remember the judge looking at both of us and saying, if this is the way you two are going to start this case off, you both have issues. And I just remember feeling like that was the biggest gut punch ever. And I remember another juncture where my judge said, you chose to marry this person. This isn't my issue to fix. Those were moments of radical acceptance. I'm in a court system that is not trained on domestic violence, let alone trauma. And so choosing my battles wisely so that the court can focus on the issues that rise to the level of concern for them is so critical. And that's in actions, communication, everything.
Absolutely. Because when you bring the frivolous topics to the court, then they're not going to take even the most important ones seriously. Agreed.
Right. And one of the communication styles of the narcissist is to, muddy the water. They want to engage you in all of the little frivolous things so that the court can't even, their head is spinning. They can't figure out what the real problems are because there's so many little things and the water is so muddy. And that's where really disengaging and choosing your battles wisely, not getting caught up in all of those attacks and how many battles we're invited to on any given week with these people, shutting off that feed source for them so we can present well.
So what are some resources about gray rock and yellow rock communication that you think might be valuable to our listeners? You've already mentioned One Mom's Battle, the canned messages. Well, if it's okay with you, we can put that in the show notes as a link.
Absolutely. I offer a course on strategic communication at the One Mom's Battle website. I also have YouTube videos available on the One Mom's Battle YouTube channel. I try to talk about it and incorporate it into almost everything we do.
So you mentioned your strategic communication course on One Mom's Battle. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you talk about?
Absolutely. It's going through different examples of communication. It's teaching people to look through the lens of the court and examples of everyday communication and how you would respond. For example, let's say my ex sends an email and it says, I fixed the zipper on Piper's jacket. It's been broken for months. Maybe you should use the child support money to buy her a new jacket. And we all know that those little digs that really hurt, because I remember myself going, I'm going to food pantries to feed my kids back in the beginning days. And so those little digs about me misusing child support. So my response to that would be, thank you for fixing her jacket. I always tell Piper that you can fix anything. And so it's completely stepping away. And so that's a lot of what I teach people, is how to respond to these people, but breaking it down so they can understand the dynamics of narcissistic communication. I have a book called The Narc Decoder, and I know that has become a really helpful, tool for a lot of people, because it helps to break it down and scrub down and see the projection, the word salad, the deflection, the gaslighting, the manipulation that goes on. So first of all, understanding, that's one of the things I try to instill in people in the course, is understanding their language, because it's a completely different language than you and I speak. One of the tips I share is, if I were going to a foreign country for, let's say, a month, I would want to know enough about their language to navigate my way around the country. But it doesn't mean when I come back home to the US that I'm going to still speak that language. It's compartmentalizing it, putting it in a box. So you understand their language, you understand how to navigate it when you need to, and then you put it up on a box and you just leave it there till you need it back again. Mm-hmm. Dealing with someone like this, you have to understand their language, so you can look at the emails and just automatically, you get to the point where you almost laugh. And that's hard for people to, when you are in that state of trauma and PTSD and anxiety and the attacks are coming. I remember it so well. It's hard to think I could ever laugh about this topic. But over time, as you really start to see how pathetic, mm-hmm. Their attempts to hurt you and engage with you are, you do move towards a place of finding humor wherever you can.
It is true that you do get to a point where you're just in a better headspace, that you can handle it and step back a little bit and see it for what it is. For myself, I actually did end up taking my co-parent to court on the communication issue. I considered it harassment. It was just nonstop. He did get a very stern lecture from the judge that a lot of the communication, pretty much 95% of it, was totally inappropriate. And that ended up helping my situation. But I got to a point where I was just responding with my own canned message, which was, I consider this harassment. I won't be responding to any messages like this in the future. And it was over and over and over again. And I don't know if that did any good, or what you might say to somebody who would suggest using something like that. It's definitely not Yellow Rock, but what do you think?
Just off the top of my head, response would probably be, these attacks are not benefiting our children or our co-parenting relationship, or I will not engage in any communication that's not beneficial to our children and our co-parenting relationship. So still showing myself to be friendly, but and just literally cutting and pasting that. I don't care if it takes 100 times, over the course of a year. I would cut and paste that exact same message over and over again, because eventually they tend to wear out, depending on who you're dealing with and where they are. I find that a lot of toxic individuals, depending on what's going on in their lives, you're at their mercy. So for 3 months, communication might be one way, and then you move into October, November, December, you've got the holidays and they're escalated and things. You almost have to keep going back to the drawing board and figuring out where they are coming from and what their tactic is this month. So
it is true. And I really like what you're saying. And what I hear you saying is to bring it back to what's best for the children and the co-parenting relationship, because that really is the heart of the matter when it comes right down to it. So great advice, Tina. Thank you so much. How can people get a hold of you?
onemomsbattle.com. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, we have state chapters available. If you are interested in connecting with people in your own area, we invite you to come to onemomsbattle.com, and it's a hub for a lot of things.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Peaceful Co-Parenting Podcast. I hope the time was well spent and you got a lot out of the episode. If so, please rate and review the podcast. I would really appreciate it. If you're interested in sending me a feedback message, asking a question, suggesting a podcast topic or guest, or downloading Peaceful Co-Parenting Messenger as a tool for better communication with your co-parent, go to peacefulparentapp.com or see the links in the show notes. Have a great week, and as always, stay peaceful.
This episode of Peaceful Co-Parent was brought to you by the Equal Shared Parenting Program. Do you find that you're ever in need of someone to talk to, like a counselor or a therapist? How about legal advice? If you've looked into it, you know these services can add up financially. That's why the Equal Shared Parenting Program exists, to help parents be their healthiest holistic selves. It's a membership program that offers discounted and free services like behavioral health, free tax prep and advice, and access to financial education and credit counseling, all for the low price of $29.99 a month. Learn more about the Equal Shared Parenting Program by going to equalsharedparentingbenefits.org/PCPM. The PCPM stands for Peaceful Co-Parenting Messenger. That's equalsharedparentingbenefits.org/PCPM.